That's the reason that we come this morning is to celebrate how great our God is. That is our proclamation. That is our witness. That is our testimony. It's not how great we are. We're not singing about your glory. We're not singing how great you art. We're singing how great God is. So we enter into this place every single Sunday morning to celebrate the goodness, the greatness of who God is. That is the reason for us coming, is for his renown. It's not for our great worship, which is great. It's not for the great coffee, which is average. It's not for the great fellowship, which is extraordinary. It's not for any other thing but to come and celebrate and proclaim and to worship and to adore and to love and to focus on what matters most, God. And he loves us so much that he made a sacrifice that saved our life. Your life has been saved because of the greatness of God. Amen? Amen. Thank you, worship team. Well, as we begin today, I want to give you a couple announcements. This month, Kathleen Trimble, you don't have to keep playing, John. I know it's very, 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 very worshipful, but you've done great. You've done great. John's going to come back up later. What I'm about to say is not appropriate to have a legit guitar, whatever that is. But this month, John, awesome. This month, Kathleen Trimble, our children's ministry director, celebrates 18 years of serving at Hope Point. She started as an office manager here, then she was our former pastor, Reverend Gary Moore's assistant. And recently, she has moved into a role of our children's ministry director. So 18 years. I believe she started when she was 12. And so we are just really, really excited for that. And so we want to celebrate her and give her some gift cards, send her a text or a note or give her a hug. She works so tirelessly every single day throughout the week across the parking lot in our children's ministry building. And we are just blessed to have Miss Kathleen a part of our staff. Also, Nancy mentioned we had our district assembly where 62 of our Nazarene churches in our region would gather together. And Miss Gail Heffley, our finance director, and also our senior adult pastor, Gail, if you stand, she was given her first district license. And so it is a really significant accomplishment in the life of a minister of the gospel. Gail has entered into a track to be ordained, and that is the first step in this track. So she's been doing classes. She's been studying. It is a significant journey to become ordained in our denomination. And so we're so proud of Gail taking that first step and receiving her district license. Also, Jonathan Doherty is also received his district license. Jonathan, would you stand? Yeah. And so we're thrilled that Jonathan is jumping into God's call and God's will for his life. And so we're just blessed to have Jonathan and Gail a part of our staff and a part of our church, and to be recognized for what God is doing. Amen. So you see, a little guitar solo wouldn't have fit with that. Or is that cool? Okay. Well, today is an exciting day for me. We always like to celebrate when we begin a new journey or a new sermon series. Sermon series are something that it's just a part of the life of churches, a lot of churches. And when I became lead pastor here, it was one of those things that I had to kind of adopt and try to do. And so if you've been coming to Hope Point over the last 5 years, you've seen my ups and downs with sermon series and should we do sermon series. And it's not real natural for me to think like 5 weeks ahead. When I study the Word, and from the Word then comes topics. Some people, some pastors will do topics and then go find a scripture. There's nothing wrong with that. My journey and my style, I read the word, and from the word then comes a topic. So sometimes sermon series aren't the most natural thing for me, but I think I'm getting better. One or two people have told me that. They happen to live with me. And so, I want to just say hi to Facebook Live. I know my mom and dad are watching today because my sister led worship today, and I'm so proud of my sister. Yeah, she got all the talent in the family. So my sister got the talent and the looks, and I think every parent has a favorite kid, and that happens to be my sister, and so I know my parents are watching today. Hey, Mom and Dad, how's it going? Good to see you. Send your grandkids some money. That'd be great. And so today we're starting a new sermon series entitled One. If you have your bulletin, you see it on there, One. And so for the next few weeks, when we gather together, I want us to focus on one word. And that one word comes from Scripture. And it's a word that we will receive on a Sunday morning. And then all throughout the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all throughout the week, I pray that that word will guide us and direct us to be available and obedient to what God is doing. Very similar to what we do to begin a new year. Many of you adopt a word for the year, not a resolution, because we make it and we break it, but a word for the year. This is my word for the year. I feel like God gave me this word for the year. We want to micro it and now do a word for the week. And so when you enter a door, or you enter an opportunity, or you have a relationship, or you have a meeting, or a gathering, or a difficult situation, this word God has planted on our minds. It's a word maybe of encouragement. It's a word maybe of inspiration. It's a word of obedience, but it's a word that will help us take on God's will. And so this morning we begin our first series in this sermon series entitled One with this word, jump. Jump. Jump into what God is calling you to do. Some of you are going to need some encouragement this week. Some of you are going to need some extra courage this week. And so when a situation comes up, I hope this word's on your mind. I need to jump into it. I need to step out on faith. I need to take a risk. I need to jump. I pray that even tomorrow, a situation comes into your life and you're thinking, gosh, what should I do? I'm going to jump. I'm going to adopt what God is saying. Maybe you need that this morning. You need that little nudge to jump. One of my favorite things as a dad was teaching my daughters to swim. How many swimmers do we have? So I know some of us don't swim, right? You're just not a swimmer. You can raise your hand in your heart. You don't swim. But I love to swim. I grew up swimming and just really enjoy the water. And so I was really anticipating when my daughters grew to the place where I could teach them to swim. And so I would get in the pool, and they'd be on the side of the pool. And I would be pleading with them to jump. And all three of them were just like, no, Daddy. And so sometimes I would put my hands on their little hips, and I would just pretend to jump and barely touch the water and then put them back up. And I won't tell you which daughters were great at it and which daughters weren't, but some were better than the other two. And so as we went through this process, it finally got to the point where they just jumped into the arms of their father. And I love that. I love where they finally got that courage because it was so fun. Once they jumped in, they got into the water and we got to play and do all kinds of things. It was exhilarating. You remember that? You ever remember jumping into something? Yes, anybody? You remember just jumping, you're like, should I go? I don't know. And you went. It was so exhilarating. And then once they get into the water, I'd put them back on the side of the pool and I would get a little bit farther away and we would learn to swim. And they did great when their eyes were on me. Because their eyes were up, Their head was out of the water, and they were focused on their father, focused on their dad, and they were doing all kinds of whatever, but they made it to me. When they struggled is when they kind of looked at everybody else, all the other activity in the pool. Or when they felt maybe the little water hit up on them, and then they looked down, and then they started to sink, panic, freak out. And then what would happen? I'd just laugh and go, look at my daughters are drowning. That's so funny. They're sinking. No, I would rush over and pick them up and put them back on the side, and we start over and over and over again. And so all three of my daughters know how to swim. I don't know if they would say they're great swimmers, but they know how to swim. They understood what it took to swim. Sometimes they made mistakes. My middle daughter, Abby, who is actually on her way right now, traveling from the airport. She just flew in from Los Angeles, so I'm so excited to see her. She's just on her way, I'm anticipating. One time, she decided to jump into the pool a different way. She decided to jump in like this. Here's the pool. And so she jumped backwards, and as she jumped, she clipped her chin on the way down. And so she has a pretty gnarly scar right here. Still to this day, it's a 25-year-old young lady. She has a scar. It's a great story. It's a great example of sometimes we have to take a risk, and sometimes we can be right where we think we should be, and we still blow it. And we think we should take a jump, and we jump wrong, and then we have a scar to remember it by. That might be you as well. You might have been called to do something, and you took a leap, and then you have a scar now. It didn't come out the way you intended it to come out. So this morning, as we enter into God's word, I want us to jump. I want us to take a step of faith. Last thing before we get started. In my beginning 20s, maybe I was 19, 20, I had a guy ask me a question that really changed the trajectory of my life. I was at a civic gathering, and we were shaking hands and greeting people, and I was there because of a class I was in college. I had to be there. And one of the questions came up of, how are you serving in your church? And so a man came up and he shook my hand. He goes, hey, young man, so you go to Olathe College Church of the Nazarene, and how are you serving in your church? I wasn't. Don't look at me so judgmental. What if I came to you right now? What if I came off this stage and I came right to you right now and I said, hey, how are you serving in this church? Oh, you look a little different now. Okay. It changed my trajectory because I wasn't serving. I didn't know how to answer it because I wasn't grabbing onto an oar and putting it into the water and helping our church be the hands and feet of Jesus. I wasn't serving. I hadn't taken that jump. So I went to our pastor and I said, I need to serve. Where should I serve? He said, well, Doug, I've been waiting for this for a long time. I was wondering when this was going to happen, and I would love for you to serve and teach a 4th grade Sunday school class. It was the most difficult thing I've ever done, even to this day. So I was dating a young lady from Port Arthur, Texas, who later became my wife, and I said, Tanya, I volunteered to do this. What are we going to do? She said, we? And so she jumped in and basically taught the class, and I assisted cutting out some sheep and coloring and things like that. But it changed my trajectory as I began to serve in my local church. It was a big leap for me. It was a big jump for me to prepare every week on all kinds of other things I was doing. So maybe that's you this morning. It's time for you to take a leap. It's time for you to take a jump and put your gifts into action. How are you serving in this local church? I believe if you want to mature in your faith, it requires serving. Maturity in the faith comes when we serve, when we jump, when we are part of something. Take with me and turn to your Bibles or your smartphones or your tablets to Matthew chapter 14. Those of you that are familiar with some of the stories of Jesus know this story very well. Matthew chapter 14. And this morning we will begin in verse 22 as we are encouraged this morning to jump. Might as well jump for my Van Halen fans. Some of you are like, man, the pastor last week, Johnny Cash, this week, Van Halen. What's up with this guy? This story that we will look at this morning comes right after one of the most exciting miracles Jesus was ever a part of, feeding of the 5,000. So he feeds 5,000 people with just a few pieces of bread and fish, this amazing miracle. Right after this, we pick up with the story, and it says this in verse 22. Immediately after this, so the after this is the feeding of the 5,000. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. So what we find out as this story begins is Jesus is the one that told his disciples that it was time to go across the lake. He was the person that said, let's go to the other side of the lake. And so I believe this story tells us that sometimes we can be right where God wants us to be, right where he told us to go, right in the center of his will, and still have storms come up. As we will read in this chapter, in this story, Jesus said, let's go to the other side of the lake. And as we will read, as they were going to the other side of the lake, a storm came up. And so we can be right where we think we should be, right in the center of what God is calling us to do, and still enter into a storm. Have some scars on our chins. I thought I was doing it right, but I jumped into the pool backwards. I was right where I was supposed to be. Jesus knows all about the storms. And he is there with us through them. Also, what we learn from these first two verses is Jesus knew he needed to get alone to pray. Separate from the masses, separate from the crowd, separate from the noise, separate from the adulation, separate from the busyness, separate from the fill in the blank, whatever it is. If it's good enough to Jesus to get alone to pray, then it must be good enough for us. So sometimes we can be right where we think we should be, right where we think God is calling us to be. We still enter into a storm. But the good news this morning is, in the midst of the storm, we will learn Jesus is with us. Verse 24, and meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land. Jesus was praying. The disciples were out in the middle of this lake. For a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. Take courage, I am here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat, or what we would say this morning, he jumped. Peter went over, I don't see him like going over the boat like this, like, I see him just, you do? You see him that way, Peter, or Barry? I don't think Peter was that kind of guy. I think Peter just went, "I'm going," jumped. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified. And he began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. The disciples were in trouble many times. This wasn't new to Jesus. The disciples were in trouble again. Nothing could stand in the way of Jesus rescuing them. Nothing could stand in the way of Jesus being present with them. Not even a body of water. This was not something natural. This was a miracle. No one had ever walked on water. I know I tried it as a child at the swimming pool. I would run as far as I could from the pool and then run back and see how far I could go in the water. Anybody ever try that? I'm sure you did, Andy. Didn't go too well, right? One step, done, you're gone. Jesus began to walk on the water. That is how in love he was with his disciples. Nothing could separate him from them by stepping out on a body of water. Never been done before. And so obviously the disciples were afraid. This was something they didn't recognize. They cried out in terror, and Jesus said, "Don't be afraid." So as we continue in this morning, listening to the call of Jesus to jump, listening to the call of Jesus to do something with the life that he died to give us, we're going to be afraid. There's going to be some obstacles. There's going to be some challenges. Jump. So Peter calls out, "If that's really you, call me out upon the water." And Jesus is like, "All right, come on over." He jumps over. He begins to walk on the water because he is focused upon the Savior. When we face a frightening situation, fixing our eyes on the source is where our strength comes from. When we face a difficult situation, fixing our eyes on the source of strength gives us the ability to do things beyond our wildest dreams. Peter was walking on the water because his focus was upon the Creator. What is God calling you to right now? It seems a little bit uncertain. As uncertain as it would be to walk upon the water. What is God calling you to do right now? Maybe it is frightening. Maybe it seems impossible. I could never walk on the water. It's so uncertain, but God's calling me to it. It's something that you can't do alone. It's something you can only do with your eyes focused upon Him. Your eyes upon Him only make it possible. But Peter began to feel the waves. Started maybe at his ankle, then at his knee, then at his thigh, and then at his hip. And he was like, whoa, I'm out in a storm. I'm out on a lake, and I can feel the wind in my hair. Let me pause for a minute. I'd love to feel that. That would be unbelievable. Felt the wind and the noise, and took his eyes off Jesus and looked to the challenges, and he looked to the obstacles, and he sank. He forgot the reason that he could walk upon the waves. He took his eyes off the strength. He took his eyes off the reason that he was doing something beyond anything he'd ever done before. He took his eyes off that. Why would we do that? But we do it a lot. And he sank. And the word says immediately Jesus reached out and grabbed him. Just like my story with my little girls. Them jumping off and hitting the water, and when they began to swim, if they'd ever struggle and just barely dip, just barely, I was there to save. I was there to rescue. I was there to bring them to the security of a father. This is what Jesus was modeling. I called you out. You took your eyes off me. I'm going to watch you sink. And say hello to Nemo on the way down. That's not our Father. That's not our God. He calls you to something. He calls you to jump. And then you jump with eyes upon him because that's who called you. Then you give into temptation. You have a moment of weakness. You take your eyes off Jesus onto something else. You begin to sink. What does he do? He reaches out, strengthens you. He reaches out and pulls you to himself. He forgot the reason he was walking on the waves. Has this ever happened to you? Taken your eye off the Father? When our eyes are on Jesus, life is abundant. Life is good. Life is full of joy, no matter what else is happening around us, the wind, the waves, the noise, the chaos. When our eyes are fixed on the Creator, there's something remarkable. Verse 31, Jesus immediately reached out, grabbed him. You have so little faith. Jesus said, why did you doubt me? When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshiped him. You really are the Son of God, they exclaimed. Now notice, Jesus reaches out, grabs Peter, and is with him until they climb back into the boat. Jesus wasn't on the boat when this storm began. He was on the shore, saw that they were in trouble, walks on the water, experiences this miracle with Peter. Peter sinks, Jesus saves him. Then they get back on the boat together. It doesn't say that Jesus stopped the storm when they went into the ship. It says when they reached the ship, then the wind stopped. I think that's significant. Jesus stayed with Peter, stayed with him in the storm, all the way till he got back to security, all the way till he got back upon his feet. You're not alone. You're not being called to take this leap or take this jump alone. Jesus is with you all the way until you get back up on your feet, all the way until you get back upon the boat when the storm ends. Jesus is with us. Sometimes we are going to have to go through the storm, and he goes with us. Sometimes the Lord will take the storm away, and sometimes we'll have to wait it out. But when we have a word from God, it makes no difference what our circumstances are saying around us. God's word is always true, which gives us courage to take on some big challenges, trusting that God will reach out and grab us. So the question isn't whether we're caught in a storm or whether we have enough faith to walk on water. The question is whether we can dare to do great things, to take a leap, to take a jump, trusting that Jesus will reach out and grab a hold of us even when we falter. This morning, if what you're relying on is not getting you through the disappointments of life, this morning, if what you are relying on is not getting you through the challenges, through the pain, through the failures, through the attacks, if what you are relying on this morning is not enough, it's time that we refocus on what matters most. Is your future secure? Is your future this morning secure? Is your eternal future secure this morning? I want to lock this place. I want to lock this place up this morning and not allow you to leave until you've made a decision for Jesus. Is your future secure? What if I came off this stage and asked you that question face to face? It's been asked of me. I feel my heart beating. It's like right here. I recall that moment when God called me to step upon the water, to take the jump, to give up everything for Him. I will never forget the moment I stepped out of a pew and made that long walk down an aisle in our church and knelt at an altar and said, yes. I am a sinner. My future is not secure. Is your future secure this morning? Do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt where you will spend eternity? I asked you a simple question earlier. Where are you serving this church? That was a pretty simple question. The guilt was pretty small. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty this morning. I hope you understand the heart that I have for you. I will never forget that moment where I knelt at an altar. My grandfather stepped off the stage, who had delivered that sermon. And he was so thankful because he said this, Doug, the day I get to heaven will be the best day of my life. But if I don't see you there, I'll never forget that. That's the heart, the desire he had for his grandson and for that congregation to celebrate eternity together. And so I come to you this morning with that same plea. What is it going to take for you to make the jump? Maybe it's something simple. Maybe you need to take a jump to talk to a neighbor, to ask for forgiveness from somebody. Maybe you want to apply for a dream job. I'm not telling you to quit your job. Maybe I am. I don't know what I'm telling you to do. It's time to take a jump. It's time to take a leap. Take a break from social media. Maybe to join a Bible study. Maybe it's to apologize to your spouse. Maybe this morning you need to confess a secret or repent of your sin. How secure are you right now in that burgundy seat on a concrete floor? And the reason I brought up the details is I remember the details of the chair I was sitting in. I remember the details of the red carpet. I remember the stained glass in my church, because I was on a path to hell. I was on a path to destruction. My eternity wasn't secure, and God was calling me to himself to step upon the water. Have I failed and made mistakes? Yes. And God has been there every single time. We are wasting our time, men and women, every Sunday morning if we don't take this jump. Is your future secure? John's going to come and we're going to sing. And I want you to remain seated. And we are listening this morning. Somebody, you got to take this jump. You got to confess your sin. You got to confess your secret. It's time for you to be a better wife, a better husband. It's not how hard you try, it's how close you get into the presence of Jesus. Your children deserve it. Your community deserves it. Your spouse deserves it. This church deserves it. It's time for you to take a jump. Is your eternity secure? If I'm face to face with you, asking you that question, and there's some of you I could ask that question and I know what you would say. Thanks be to God. Yes, I am his and he is mine. I am a sinner, saved by grace. Thanks be to God. And so as we sing, I want you to come and kneel at this altar or just stand to your feet. You've been called this morning to talk to a neighbor, to quit a habit. Whatever God's calling you to do, you're going to say yes. And so I want you to signify by standing up or coming to an altar. And I'll ask our ministry staff to be prepared to pray with you. I'll ask those that have been in the way of God for decades, that are secure, that know would be on a shadow of a doubt that it is well with their soul. I would have you now pray for those sitting next to you. Pray for those people on another side of the building, or pray that you can come and pray with someone. Is that clear? Yes. In these next few moments, I want to be crystal clear. This is your call to jump. I have never preached a sermon where my heart was beating. I'm always been on the other side, listening to a sermon and my heart start to beat, and I know I needed to jump. I know I needed to be better for my wife and my kids, and I just stood up and said, start with me. Forgive me, for I have sinned. And so if my heart is beating, I know somebody else's is. So John begins to sing. Stand up, not because other people might be. Jump. Get out of the boat. Get off the pool side. Get into the water. For the living God is waiting to give you life. And then let's baptize you next week or at the 11 o'clock service. Let's remain seated as John leads us. Let's sing.
Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the world lies in me, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe. Sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
Maybe I wasn't clear. Is God calling you to anything? Stand to your feet. Maybe I wasn't clear. Is God calling you to anything? God stirred your heart for anything? Stand to your feet. I don't want to manipulate it. If it didn't happen as quickly as I wanted, it's not about me, but men and women, we have too much at stake. The enemy is waiting for you to attack. Is your eternity secure? There's so much for you that God has, and all as He is requiring of you is to say yes. Let's keep singing.
That God is some not sparing, send Him to die. I scarce can take it in. That on the cross, my burden gladly bearing, He bled and died to take away my sin. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
Thank you, beloved. Thank you, beloved, for being reverent and respectful this morning. So as we conclude our time of prayer, if you have been stirred to take a leap, if you have been stirred to take a jump, share it with somebody today. Be accountable. Share it with me. Share it with the person next to you. Share it with the person you live with. What you are about to experience will blow your mind. What you are about to experience in the secure arms of Jesus will be beyond anything you've ever experienced. And now you go and tell others about our Savior. And I'm serious about the baptism thing. It's time for you to get baptized. Let's all stand as we conclude this morning. As we as a body are united to take this leap or take this jump together, how are you serving this house? If I'm face to face with you this morning and I ask you, how are you serving Colby? He would even hesitate and tell me how he's serving. It's time to take a leap. It's time to take a jump. It's time to glorify and proclaim the name of Jesus by serving Him. That's where maturity begins, is when we begin to serve and investigate God's word. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, my prayer this morning is that every single man, woman, and child in this building today can answer that question. Is your eternity secure? And without hesitation, yes, it is well with my soul. There will be waves, there will be wind, there will be obstacles, there will be chaos, but our eyes upon you, the source of our strength, gives us all that we need. We are not alone this morning. We pray over our marriages and our families. We pray for our single men and women, our children, our city. Cover us. In your name we pray. We pray these things. In your glorious name. We say, so be it. And amen. Amen. To God be the glory, beloved. You are sent this morning.